Welcome to Twists of Life, where every story has an unexpected turn. Stories of joy and sorrow, hope and redemption, just like the life we all live. Make yourself comfortable. It's time to begin. Every evening, approaching the familiar turn, Eleanor Bennett would slow her pace. Behind it was hidden the children's home, and in the early evening hours, children's voices filled the air. The little ones, noticing a passerby, would hurry to the fence, their eyes pleading, and the bravest would whisper through the bars, "Auntie, aren't you my mommy?" The young woman's heart would clench with pain every time. She could have changed her route, avoided meeting those children's gazes, but the burning desire to become a mother and the bitter realization of her own inability to have a child drew her to this place. It was her personal agonizing ritual when a strange, abandoned little one would ask, "Aren't you looking for me?" That day, as always, she stopped, looking at the playground with a mixture of fear and inexplicable hope. The children were engrossed in their game, but by the fence, a small boy in a bright red jacket stood alone. He raised his eyes to the approaching woman, not saying a word, but in his gaze was so much unspoken pleading that Eleanor Bennett's heart trembled. While she walked past, his eyes followed her relentlessly. She returned home in complete confusion, and her husband immediately noticed her paleness. George Miller asked worriedly, "Ellie, what happened? You look like you've seen a ghost." She began hesitantly, "Georgie, I've wanted to talk to you for a long time." The words stuck in her throat, unable to find their way out. Her husband chuckled, trying to lighten the mood. "Ellie, you're starting so hesitantly, fidgeting. What happened? Is it something so important it could turn our lives upside down?" She took a deep breath. "You know, Georgie, that I can't have children?" He frowned, not understanding why she was stirring up an old wound, for they had already come to terms with this sorrow. Eleanor Bennett continued pleadingly, "Georgie, please listen to me. Every day I walk past the children's home. There are abandoned children there, unwanted by anyone." Her voice trembled. "Today I saw a boy. He was just standing and looking at me. His eyes turned my whole soul upside down." She looked her husband directly in the eyes. "Georgie, I want to adopt him. He will be our son." George Miller cleared his throat hesitantly, thinking aloud, "I haven't really thought about this. Surely normal parents wouldn't abandon their children?" Eleanor Bennett knew what he would say, but tried to convince him. "There are accidents, other circumstances. Not all these children have bad heredity." She reached out her hand. "My Georgie, please, let's go together. Let's look at this boy." This conversation didn't subside all evening, and even at night, before sleep. The next day, George Miller met his wife from work, and they walked the familiar road together. Eleanor Bennett walked with a pounding heart, tormented by fears. What if her husband didn't love the boy? What if he had already been taken? What if they didn't recognize him among the other children? But the boy stood in the same place, lonely and quiet. The couple approached the fence, trying to talk to him, but he only silently looked with his large, pleading gray-blue eyes. Then they decided to go in and talk to the director. Helen Davis told them Igor's sad story. His parents died in an accident, his grandmother recently passed away, and he had no one else left. The boy was healthy and intelligent, but very sad, not knowing about his parents' death, still waiting for their return. The director added, "And yesterday he told me, 'I saw an auntie. She's probably my mommy. She's looking for me. He's waiting for that auntie to definitely come and find him.'" Hearing this, Eleanor Bennett couldn't hold back her tears. Her husband awkwardly comforted her, but tears were in his eyes too. Leaving, they knew for sure that they would return for little Daniel. Soon their lives completely changed, filled with new meaning. A son appeared in their family, their beloved Daniel, the smartest, the most capable, the most loved boy in the world. Years flew by unnoticed, whistling in their ears with passing days and weeks. The parents didn't notice how Daniel grew up, successfully finished school and university, went into business, and became a prosperous man. Now they didn't have to count every penny, as before, when they lived on the modest salaries of a nurse and a plumber. For Daniel, they always found the means for the best food, clothing, and summer holidays, saving on themselves. Now their son, as if in gratitude, strove to give his parents everything best. They went abroad for the first time, changed their apartment, bought a large dacha and a new car. One beautiful day, Daniel brought his fiancée to meet them, a modest and sweet girl named Sarah. Soon they had a wedding without unnecessary pomp, and the young couple went on their honeymoon. The pleased parents eagerly awaited grandchildren, happily guessing in the evenings who their beloved son would have. Eleanor Bennett dreamed of a granddaughter with bows, and George Miller dreamed of a grandson for fishing and the garage. But the newlyweds returned, and little Sarah's slender figure remained unchanged. The parents timidly hinted about children, but the young couple kept silent. Several years passed, but the desired grandchildren still didn't appear. One day Eleanor Bennett couldn't stand it anymore and asked her son directly, "My Danny, when will you make us happy with grandchildren? Why are you delaying?" Her son blinked in confusion, admitting awkwardly, "Mom, Sarah was given a grim diagnosis. She will never be able to become a mother." He sighed heavily. "We've come to terms with it. Perhaps it's destiny. But I love Sarah and will never leave her. Let's not talk about this anymore. It's painful enough for us." The elderly woman's heart ached. Was history repeating itself? A few days later, Eleanor Bennett walked the familiar road again, one she hadn't walked for many years. Before the turn to the children's home, her heart ached painfully again. She took the last step and stopped, looking at the playground. Children were playing. Some, like many years ago, ran to the fence, their eyes looking with hope and anxiety. Tears welled up in her eyes. She wanted to hug and pity all these unhappy, fate-deprived children. A few days later, she came here with her daughter-in-law. Both women stood by the fence for a long time, watching the children. A little girl in a bright blue jacket came up to them, looked closely, and asked, "Auntie, did you come for me?" Upon hearing these words, Sarah burst into tears, unable to stop. Her mother-in-law whispered something in her ear, then they hugged and laughed through their tears. A week later, Sarah and Eleanor Bennett came to this now familiar children's home with Daniel. But when they spoke to the director about the girl, she said she couldn't give her away. "How? Why?" Eleanor Bennett gasped. "We've already grown to love her. She recognized us. We're ready to start the adoption procedure." Helen Davis sighed. "The thing is, Marina has a twin sister, Katie. She's been a bit unwell. That's why she wasn't outside." The director told the girls' tragic story, losing their father, a drinking mother who abandoned them, and being saved by neighbors. "Poor girls," Eleanor Bennett sighed. "Such little ones, and they've been through so much." The director continued, "They are healthy, without abnormalities, and there are no relatives." Sarah timidly asked, "Can we meet the girls?" Helen Davis hesitated, afraid of hurting the children's souls with false hope. Daniel's voice was firm, holding back his emotions. "We won't change our minds. We will definitely take these girls." He added with certainty, "We are very determined, and the guardianship won't have reasons to refuse us." Days began, filled with pleasant chores of collecting documents. Despite their busyness, Sarah, Daniel, Eleanor Bennett, and even George Miller found time to drop by the children's home. They visited their future daughters and granddaughters, Marina and Katie, making plans for their life together. And finally, the long-awaited day arrived. Eleanor Bennet set a festive table, baked pies, her heart fluttering with anticipation. When the doorbell rang and the door opened, she clutched her heart and cried with happiness. All four, Daniel, Sarah, and their newfound daughters, were beaming with joy and cheerfulness. A new life began, full of worries, problems, and boundless happiness. The young couple lived separately, but the grandparents often visited their beloved granddaughters. The girls grew, becoming more independent, and Sarah turned out to be a wonderful, loving, and appropriately strict mother. One day Daniel called his mother and invited her and his father over on Sunday, promising a big surprise. George Miller drawled thoughtfully, "Interesting. What have they planned? It doesn't seem like any holidays are coming up." Eleanor Bennet smiled affectionately. "Let's go. We'll see. They and Sarah have been very busy lately. I've been constantly looking after the girls." On Sunday, upon entering their son's apartment, the parents gasped in surprise. In the middle of the room stood a large stroller in which lay two chubby, rosy-cheeked babies. "What is this? How is this possible?" was all Eleanor Bennet could utter. Daniel and Sarah were smiling. "Sarah and I decided that besides daughters, we also want sons," Daniel said. "We didn't manage 2 sons, but here, meet them. This is James and Annie. They are 5 months old. These are our children." He looked at his mother. Sarah quit her job to fully dedicate herself to the children, but she, Mom, can't do without your help. And yours, of course, too, Dad. "Oh, how happy I am!" exclaimed the proud grandmother of 4 grandchildren. "How rich I am! 3 granddaughters and 1 grandson. But I think we won't stop here." Daniel hugged his wife, and Sarah returned his gaze lovingly. "Of course, darling," she whispered, "for children are such immense happiness.